Last week, we read a really strange piece of news. Apparently, an expert committee recommended the Drugs Control Authority of India to ban the over the counter sale of emergency contraceptive pills like iPill and Unwanted 72. They suggested that women should only be allowed to access it with a doctor's prescription because the committee had concerns about the side effects.
Now, this was weird for many reasons. One, levonorgestrel, which is what these pills contain, is one of the safest emergency contraceptives available in the world. It's approved by the World Health Organization and it's also approved by FDA. In fact, it's so safe that even breastfeeding women can take it.
Second, these emergency contraceptive pills are already a part of the Indian government's family welfare program. It was approved by the Drugs Controller General of India back in 2001. 10 years later, the Ministry of Health even made it a part of the ASHA workers' drug kit.
So, as you can imagine, ever since, it's been pretty easy to access. In fact, it was also available on quick commerce apps like Blinkit, Swiggy, and Zepto. Until the day when this news came out.
I immediately called Rahel and we both checked all of these apps together and realized that suddenly these pills were not available anywhere on any of these apps. And the weird thing here was that the DCGI had not even made a decision yet. It was just a recommendation by the committee, and news reports said that the Drugs Authority was mulling over it. It was not banned, but it was possible that it could be banned.
Also, important to note, the news was not about a ban on levonorgestrel itself, but a ban on buying it without a prescription. So Snigdha and I were obviously pretty alarmed. How could this be happening? We began calling up people to find out more. Soon enough, though, to our relief and to the relief of every woman in India, the Drugs Control Authority came up with a clarification saying that no such ban was going to take place.
But it did bring us face to face with the possibility that something as life-changing or as life-saving, in fact, as the emergency pill, which is the one saving grace that women have in India when it comes to their reproductive rights and bodily autonomy, could be taken away. Just like that.
After 20 years of it being around, were we taking it for granted? And why shouldn't we, right? But then again, look at what's happening in the US with its abortion laws. India, comparatively and thankfully, seems way more progressive when it comes to a woman's reproductive rights.
But we all know, it's not really the same outside the policy world. In real life, even though more than 60% of emergency contraceptives in our country are sold over the counter, women often hesitate to buy it themselves. The fear of judgment, of shame, not just from the outside world, but from their own families also comes in the way.
So we decided to talk to two experts about this chasm that exists between our seemingly progressive policies and our actual society and its attitude towards emergency contraceptive pills.
The first is Mr. Vinoj Manning, the CEO of the iPass Development Foundation India, a 50-plus-year-old organization that works to improve the environment for safe abortion and increase access to comprehensive contraceptive care in the country.
The second guest, many of you may know her already, is Lisa Mangaldas. She is a sex educator known for her content across social media platforms. She happens to have millions of followers. She's also written The Sex Book and is the founder of a sexual wellness brand called Lizu.
Hello and welcome to yet another special episode of Daybreak. I'm Snigdha.
And I'm Rahel. And every week, we come together to talk about something in business and tech that interests the both of us.
And it won't just be us. Depending on what we're talking about, we will also have a bunch of really interesting people on the show.
Stay tuned.
Before we even get started with the interviews, we went to Dr. Ankesh Sahitya, a gynecologist and obstetrician based out of Mumbai, to get our facts right about levonorgestrel. One of the most common myths about these pills is that they can cause an abortion. So we asked him about the difference between an emergency contraceptive pill and an abortion pill.
So levonorgestrel is nothing but a progesterone. It is used in the emergency contraceptive pill. Ideally, it causes the endometrial lining to thicken, the mucus to thicken, which prevents sperm penetration and implantation. And in certain cases, if taken at the right time, can even prevent ovulation. Abortion pills, if you want to differentiate the two, abortion pills are used to evacuate and abort an already implanted pregnancy. Levonorgestrel, which is there in the emergency pill, ideally helps in preventing pregnancy occurrence in the first place.
Also, what exactly are the side effects of these pills?
The proven side effects of the emergency pill, if taken unnecessarily, can lead to irregular periods, can lead to frequent periods, or even a missed periods. In short, when not indicated, it can cause irregular periods.
Also, to make it very clear, emergency contraceptive pills are, as the name suggests, for emergencies. They are not meant to be used as regular birth control. Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's talk to Mr. Vinoj Manning.
Vinoj, IPAS, your organization, works across the world, right, in making safe abortion and contraception more accessible to women. How is India? How is India placed as a country when it comes to access to contraceptives compared to the rest of the developing world? And I'm talking about awareness as well. How many women actually know about the existence and availability of emergency contraceptive pills?
India, contrary to this controversy, at least from a policy perspective and a drug approval perspective, and from the private sector perspective, have been pretty advanced in moving and in line with global trends in getting the product into India. Uh, the product got launched in the US in '99. And in India, the drug controller approved it in 2001, 2002. Just for your information, about 85 countries in the world, that's about 50%, uh, emergency contraceptives are available over the counter without a prescription. So is it in India. So having said that, that's in terms of policy. But when it comes to practice, as you mentioned, lack of awareness, lack of distribution, lack of agency of women make this product very difficult for them, women to access them when they need it.
Right. And Vinoj, I'm sure there are a lot of myths and misconceptions that you and your organization have to tackle very often when you're, speaking to women, working with women on the ground. What are some of the most common myths that you hear around ECPs?
Our experience shows there are two buckets of misconceptions or myths. One is that, as you say, what is the myths, misconceptions among women? Among women, a very strong belief is that if you use ECPs, emergency contraceptive pills, it causes abortion in the future, or it causes later on pregnancies could get aborted. It's a very, very common myth. Contrary to that, they also believe, some of them, that use of ECPs, repeated use of contraceptives, emergency contraceptives, can lead to infertility. Both these are absolutely myths. So these are some of the myths that women have about the use of ECPs. But what compounds the problem is the societal myths, which lead to stigma. A strong belief people have, society has, is the availability of emergency contraceptive pills promotes promiscuity in the society. And that ECPs should not be available for young unmarried women because it gives them sexual freedom. Now, these are part of the societal myths very often, which probably are behind some of the conversation about restricting the availability of the pills.
Vinoj, can you tell us a little bit about the role of the gynecologist or the doctor, in kind of changing these attitudes? And I'm asking this because it's very often doctors who spread this kind of misconception about the use of ECPs, especially in rural areas, or maybe actually it's the same in urban areas as well.
One disclaimer I would have is it's not just about gynecologists, it's about any kind of doctor that's available, because in most of the areas, rural areas that we work in, we don't have gynecologists. Women access all types of doctors, all types of providers for their health needs. So they, as a community, and I'm combining all of them, have a big role to play in changing such attitudes, uh, promoting the accessibility of emergency contraceptives. But maybe let me just give you a national figure. You see, overall, the unmet need for contraception is around 9%. That's 9% of women in the between the age group of 15 to 49 feel that they have a need for contraception, but which is not met. This literally doubles when you look at young people between the age of 15 to 24. So what is the implication is that they are very higher proportion, higher probability of them having an unwanted pregnancy, right? Therefore, for the relative need for a product like emergency contraceptive is far more important to younger people, more vulnerable people, because they in their reproductive cycle they may want to manage a pregnancy, but they don't have the contraception access to contraception. The need is not met. So that's the relative importance of this product, right? Now what happens is, doctors, realizing this, need could definitely play a far more proactive role in educating them and counseling people, clients who come in, because knowledge of emergency contraceptives is very low. It is estimated that less than 15% women, both rural and urban, know about the details about the emergency contraception, and that it is not a contraceptive, but it is an emergency contraception that is postcoital, and you can use it up to 3 days. So the education, the counseling is one big piece. The other important piece is about providing and supportive environment by saying, giving them good information and saying that I, as a provider, am available to you. Use this product, but if there is anything that you need, post that. I am there to provide you the support that is expected from a health provider. And finally, accessibility. If only all gynecologists, all doctors could carry a stock of emergency contraceptives and provide it to clients who need them at their point of service, at their clinics, it will go a long way in addressing the challenges that this product has today.
Right. Actually, Vinod, I wanted to point out one of the reasons why I asked you this question about doctors is also because a lot of doctors are pro life, which is why they kind of discourage the use of ECPs. There was this one particular study that was done in Uttar Pradesh that found this. And I'm sure this happens not just in UP, in other places in India as well. Uh, do you know about any such cases?
See, technically, especially a doctor who, even if he's pro-life, I have a problem with that at all, because it's not the doctor's decision; it is the client's decision, right? Uh, e- so there is a problem there itself. But having not getting into that argument, ECP is not even, ECP happens. It's not abortion. It happens prior to that, prior to the pregnancy, uh, initiation of pregnancy. So the emergency contraceptives, like contraceptives, should not get into this debate of pro-life, anti-choice, or pro-choice debate.
Right. Vinod, the nature of the conversation around family planning, birth control, even ECPs for that matter, it's vastly different here in India than the rest of the world, right? Is it kind of unique in that sense? It would be interesting to know, from an international standpoint, especially considering the work that your organization is doing. How different is that conversation here in India?
See, our problem is India is very unique, or maybe South Asia is unique, right? We do not have too much of an anti choice discourse. But the problem is at the end of it, the gender dynamics in India is very strong. Men, in laws, everybody other than the woman is controlling the what do you call it, the uh, f- controlling the decisions on family planning and etc., right? The agency for women is lost in this whole debate. Secondly, the patriarchal norms that we have is so deep seated even among providers. We talked a bit about provider myths, etc., and I didn't talk about it then. But today, you go to a traditional, check it out where you are. Very modern girls, if they go in and say, if you're unmarried, you have your own set of complications and constraints. But let's take a married young person. You go and tell your provider that I want to have a contraception, or I want an emergency contraception, and I'm married, right? But I have an emergency contraception because I don't want a child. So the first question the doctor asks is, do you have any child now? You answer no. Then say, no, no, I would advise that you have the child, because it's very important that you have finish your fertility cycle and then have your first child. Why? Because society demands that. The men need to prove their fertility. The families need to have their succession higher in, and that's what leads to, and providers are finally products of the society, products of the patriarchal norms that we have. So the debate here is very different. It comes from different societal conditions and patriarchal norms.
Yeah, they'll even ask questions like, does your husband know? Or do you have his permission, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
But Vinod, let's get back to this news that there could be a possible ban on the sale of emergency contraceptive pills without a prescription, right? There was this expert committee that supposedly studied these side effects, and then they made this recommendation to the Drugs Control Authority. Now, I don't understand what happened with that. Like, we don't know. How did they come to that conclusion? I mean, obviously, they did come out with that clarification later that there is no ban, but what I'm trying to say is that how does this process work? Like, how do they make these decisions about such life changing, life saving drugs? Like, why is the whole process not more transparent?
Let's step back. To answer your question, let me step back. How does a new drug get approved in India? The Director General, the Direct Drug Control Authorities, the DCGI, Drug Control General of India, that department, on an appeal of new drug, they do clinical trials, they do safety assessments, there is expert consultation, there is a lot of dossiers set up on providing, the clinical trials are right from 1 to 4 clinical trials, different type of trials are tested. There's a very standard clear practice which is very similar to that of the FDA in the US, on which the drug is approved. So this drug, for example, got approved in 2001 in India, right? So the and nothing has changed. The composition is the same. Everything has changed. There should not even be any more questions around this. This drug is being used in India. The drug is being used by the government. It is a part of the government family planning program, right? And suddenly we have this issue. Now, the problem is, because these processes lack clarity, as you said, leading to a lot of public confusion and fear. As it is, people are worried about ECP. There is so much myths. When some newspapers carry this article, media carries this article, and it creates even more myths among women, among people, users. So I do agree with you that there is a need for greater transparency by involving a range of stakeholders which currently are not there. In my opinion, there is not enough adequate stakeholders of healthcare providers and advocacy groups that can ensure a diverse perspectives are considered. And then a clear communication protocol saying this is where the regulatory decisions are, and this is where it is each of these products drugs are there, trying to demystify the process. But having said this, in this particular case, I don't even think there should be any conversation around this because the product has been an established product, right?
Right. So while we're on the subject of accessibility, Vinod, we live in Bangalore and our office is actually located in Indranagar. Not too far from where we are, there is this clinic that's been around for quite a while now. It's called Proactive for Her. The sell there was that, it's meant to be this progressive, non-judgmental clinic. So anyone can go in, consult with a gynecologist. And it's very unlike your traditional experience. You're constantly asked for consent every step of the way. And it's just meant to be a much more pleasant experience overall. The catch, of course, is that it is on the more expensive side. My question is, how far are we from a reality where regular public health infrastructure for women is like that, right? Realistically speaking, do you think that there is a possibility somewhere down the line where we'll have healthcare like that for absolutely everyone?
You drive a very, very important, very, very critical point, which drives from the inequality. Everything in our society is so much, what do you call it, stacked against the poor. Right? You were giving me an example of Bangalore. Let me tell you, I was in Bangalore last week. And I was shocked to find out we work with the government. The government provides free abortion services, and there are these. I don't know whether you're aware. We have medical abortion, that is abortion done through tablets. It's a combination tablet that if you can go to a chemist and buy the product for, it's supposed to be given under the supervision of a provider, but the tablet per se costs about 500 rupees. One of the largest chain hospitals in Bangalore charge 45,000 rupees for this outpatient procedure. What do? They give, it's a 500 rupee product. It's mind blowing. And unfortunately, just if they walk around, there are government clinics, not too many of them, unfortunately, which is why they are able to charge this much, which is providing the services, but people don't know about it, and there's not enough government clinics. Having said that, I do believe that the societal attitudes, not just towards ECPs and contraceptives, but overall the fertility is shifting to the positive because of a few things like awareness, increased awareness, increased educational levels. The digital presence is a huge, what do you call it, balancer uh, of thing. The level of information rural girls have through digital sources is also, I think, it adds on to shifting, and there is therefore they're also exposed to stronger role models. mm, which makes them also try and gain agency within their society, and even small things, how media's representation of women, availability of women health providers, and finally lots of the grassroots initiatives that organizations do in discussing and promoting reproductive rights, reducing stigma, etc., also help.
Talking about the role of the internet in spreading awareness and finding stronger role models, our next guest does just that and more. She's one of the most well known sex educators in India.
My name is Lisa Mangaldas. I'm an award-winning sexuality educator and author of the Sex Book. I started creating content online focused on sexuality education that is judgment-free, scientifically accurate, and with a strong focus on women's pleasure in about 2017. And it's been several years now. My community really grew. I've also started a pleasure brand called Lizu's. So sex and pleasure has been the key focus areas of my work and life and thinking for the last nearly a decade.
Lisa, what was your initial reaction to this news?
I was surprised because why would we the last thing we need to be doing is um, cracking down on hard-fought freedoms, At least with the marital rape thing, it's something that needs to be overturned. We're not going backwards like the US did on abortion. So I hope we keep taking steps forward. And I was happy to find that news had been slightly misinterpreted, or a mountain had been made of a molehill, or whatever it is. However, I mean, in states like Tamil Nadu, it is already hard to access emergency contraception, even though it legally should be available. So I feel like there's the law, there's the application of the law, there's the biases of the people who are supposed to be working within the laws, whether it's doctors, whether it's chemists, whether it's local states, administration, So
These pills have been available over the counter in India for roughly 20 years now, right, Lisa? And you work with a lot of young women who've actually grown up being aware of the existence of ECPs thanks to the internet. What's the kind of impact that you've seen, these pills have on their right to make decisions about their own bodies?
I think that emergency contraception is something that allows for people to have some autonomy over what I wish we had even more autonomy around, like the fact that contraception can fail even if you have another method in place, or that you could be a survivor of assault, or unfortunately, women have so little agency in so many aspects of their own sexual and romantic lives, that I think something like emergency contraception, the fact that people even think in 2024 we should be debating its availability, is like, why are we still having this conversation,
That's so true. Actually, earlier we were just speaking to Vinoj Manning from IPAS, and he was telling us how policy wise India is pretty progressive, when we look at reproductive rights and women's bodily autonomy. But then he also pointed out how things are very different on the ground in terms of, acceptance and awareness.
I just think there's like such a continuous attack on women's agency and autonomy at every level in their navigation of their own sort of particularly sexual rights, that it's just absurd that people think that women will have more sex, or women will, as if women have that agency at all, like people will talk as if women are so busy having this wild, amazing sex that they're rushing off to get the emergency contraception tomorrow. I wish that was the case. Women are made to be terrified of sex. Women are made to feel like they don't even have agency to have the kind of sex that they want, or to even want sex. Sex is something that just happens to women. And then women have to deal with the consequences of that sex, So I just think like the whole, like the conversation is absurd. The people will talk as if women have so much sexual agency that any kind of sexual health resources or solutions are like, fueling these horny women, like who are having all these orgasms. Like, I wish it was like that. That's just not how it is, So I find it very funny that the moral panic around anything that allows women some agency. It's like, look at what agency do we even have to get here? Like, all you're going to be doing is preventing people who might not have even, it's like the conversation is so skewed. And I think there's massive double standards in how we look at women's sexuality.
True. And then, of course, there are all those myths and misconceptions that make all of this like 10 times worse, right?
I think a lot of people are very afraid of taking this medication because there's like this fear mongering around how bad it is for you. Like, oh, you're taking this hormone bomb. It's going to like make you infertile. It's going to wreck your cycle forever. It's going to like, as if I think the fact that there's unfortunately, so much shame around particularly premarital sex already is like playing on the mind of the young person, where they almost think they deserve some sort of negative outcome, like punishment for this shameful thing they went ahead and did anyway. So there's like a guilt and shame clouding their perception of potential outcomes already. Okay, now you're having to take this pill and you feel so guilty about what you did already, that suddenly this pill and what can happen to you also seems like much worse than it. The whole I think fear, guilt, and shame surrounding firstly having the sex, now having to take this pill, and ends up creating urban legend around how bad these pills are for you. and they're actually not so horribly bad for you. Levonorgestrel, which is why there's different EECs, and I'm sure the gynac on this show can elaborate. I'm not a doctor, and I want to make that clear, but that these are safe medications, and it's not so much that they can like irrevocably wreck you or whatever. That is what you should be thinking about. It's just that instead of using it as your default contraceptive method, if you're having regular sex, you have more effective methods out there. So why not take one that is statistically more efficacious, right? Like an IUD, where there's less room for error, where you don't have to go get it, where you are in the cycle doesn't matter as much because you're constantly on it. It's just good to know that if you're sexually active and you're keen not to get pregnant, there are other methods with statistically higher efficacy and ease of use that you might benefit from.
Exactly. It's all about having that choice, right? Like most women, at least the ones who know about ECPs and then they decide to take it, they can read, because these pills come with this long list of do's and don'ts and the possible side effects in all languages, including that warning where it says that you're not supposed to use it as regular birth control. It's meant for emergencies, right?
Often it's like the fears are so overstated, or even if you take it a few times or whatever, like you could take this pill and yes, it might interfere with your your period date, or there are minor side effects, but there's not, and I don't mean to be downplaying side effects either, but it is safe medication. People tend to very conveniently use arguments for and against medication that serves their ideologies. Like we all went and took that COVID vaccine, right? And I'm glad we did. I'm just saying we all went and took that COVID vaccine. Some people died, statistically negligible number apparently, because the rest of us still had to go take it. And so when it comes to contraception, though, people will state like the rarest of rare, as if it's as if it's representational of what could happen to you, whereas like there is enough and more certification involved before medication can be available over the counter. And I think doctors agree that it is a safe medication. And also this whole thing of like how many people need to be involved before a woman can make a decision for herself, I think especially when there's a very short window, things should also be at the behest of the woman's decision, whether it's abortion, whether it's, there's various things where you have to involve doctors in your decision making by law, where I think we need to be recognizing also women's, like the wish of the woman, not just what uncles think,
Plus, there's also that question of people having access to this sort of information, which of course is something that you've been relentlessly doing through the internet.
We deny them information and then we're like, you're too dumb to make a decision. So some uncle who might be biased or bigoted or I don't know, whatever, colluding with your abuser, or who knows, man, some random third party has to take these decisions for you. So I think like the whole system needs an overhaul, right?
Right. Lisa, can you talk a little bit about the role of social media, like the role that social media plays when it comes to informing people on things like this? And also, where do things stand now compared to when you started?
I have some thoughts. Social media, I think, can be and has been for many people, I think, very useful. I think a lot of people, not just social media, but the internet in general has tended to be the go-to for anyone with internet access when they have a sex question or a question about contraception, or like it's their first point of information because their parents, school, and other people seem to be less reliable sources, unfortunately, right? I wish that wasn't the case. I wish we were able to go to some sort of credible adult who cares about us, but that tends not to be an option. So the internet is your first point. I think for like the vast majority, if you have an internet connection, that's where you're going with a sex question. And so I think that it behooves us to have really great and easy to access resources findable on the internet, because there's also a lot of rubbish on the internet, right? There's lots of misinformation. Unfortunately, media literacy and discernment is like absolutely key when you're sifting through the internet trying to look for answers to something, because you'll find some really valuable information, but you'll also find like sex negative, misogynistic, unscientific stuff as well, right? So I think we, again, like equipping young people with the sense of discernment and with at least some information so that they know when they're looking, which sources to trust and which not to would be great. I've been trying to make sex education fun to watch, because nobody wants to watch boring videos or read some boring articles, right? And unfortunately, so often any public health communication to a young person just seems dreadfully boring. So I think that, if people in the public health and policy, family planning, et cetera, arenas are trying to reach out to young people and empower them with this information, I feel like we got to stop pretending we don't do this stuff. Someone in a white coat, like talking down to the young person, wagging their finger as if they never have sex, but like, you lesser mortals doing this naughty stuff. I think we need to, and I think that's why my content has worked, I think, because I'm not talking down. We're just talking together. It's like peer to peer. I don't pretend like I don't have sex, or sorry, like I don't have sex or don't like it, or like I'm somehow morally superior and giving you this like lecture, I think I try and keep the fear and shame out of it completely, because I don't feel any, and to make it sound like a thing that people just a part of life,
Right. So social media platforms obviously have a huge role to play here. I mean, at least the hope is that we'll get to a point where this sort of information becomes a really normal part of public healthcare. But I mean, again, that's
It's going to take a
obviously,
while.
yeah, it's a long way off.
Unfortunately, the social media platforms now are making it very difficult to do this work, even for organizations like the UNFPA or Planned Parenthood, or, I mean, literally doesn't matter how big you are. The social media platforms are cracking down on sex education, sexual health and reproductive rights information, particularly when it comes to the information pertaining to female bodies and queer sexuality, like anything that's not like cishet and male. Is particularly censored. You can read about this stuff. I think that Ken has even done a story about it. But there's over the last few years, there's been increasing amounts of censorship around content, or whether it's STIs, contraception, pleasure, identity, like anything in the sexuality arena is now subject to more and more censorship on Meta's platforms, as well as to some extent Amazon, Google, YouTube. When you're looking for these products and things as well, it's harder to find, it's harder to market them. It's anything in the sexual wellness arena, basically, whether it's content or some sort of resource, product, service, etc. The platforms that now everybody relies on, it is not a level playing field. You will find, some information is easier to find than other information, and the platforms are by design making it harder and harder to find rights-based sexual health education. Easier to find porn, sadly.
And that brings us to the end of this episode. I hope it gave you perspective about where things stand as of now when it comes to contraception and women's reproductive autonomy in India. But before we go, we asked a few women to imagine a world where emergency contraceptive pills did not exist. Here's what they had to say.
In a world where women have limited control over choices regarding their own bodies anyway, where the onus of contraception falls on the woman, and where men are not the most careful or trustworthy when it comes to using contraceptive methods like condoms, it would be absolutely terrifying to see the few things women can control, like contraceptive pills, disappear or become harder to procure. A world without contraceptive pills would mean I wouldn't be able to have sex stress free or without fear. I would have very little control over my body, and I would have to depend on potentially judgmental doctors to deal with issues of unwanted pregnancy.
According to NFHS 5 data, at least one third of the men believe that the onus of contraception is on women. Emergency contraceptive pills may not be a perfect solution, but it is a good solution for women who need to prevent unplanned pregnancies, especially in situations where they don't want their partners to know about it. Because we know in our country, women can't really go to doctors without men knowing about it, and unplanned pregnancies are absolutely a bad idea um, anywhere, but especially in a country as populous as India.
It's so concerning that the second I tried to imagine a world without emergency contraceptive pills, I genuinely came up with nothing, because truly that's like what the one fail safe that we have, right? Something dependable, cheap, and something that you can access easily. And when I thought of like what I would do if I didn't have that as an option, I had to go Google alternative to emergency contraceptive pills, and the first thing that comes up is an IUD. So I guess if apparently you can immediately put in an IUD after having unprotected sex, like within 5 days, and that would like prevent any pregnancy. But immediately I was like, what a nightmare, because I have read about how incredibly painful IUD insertions are, because they don't give you local anesthesia. And I've heard like people pass out when you've had like copper teas inserted and stuff. So immediately I was like, oh God, spiraling. That's the only like other effective alternative to emergency contraceptive pills. So I guess if we don't have those, then you have to go get an IUD inserted immediately. And that means like making a doctor's appointment, go to see a gynecologist, like finding out if that's even an option for you, that if it'll even work for you. And then figuring out the pain and having to deal with all of that and having something inserted inside your body. What a nightmare.
Daybreak is produced from the newsroom of the Ken, India's first subscriber-focused business news platform. What you're listening to is just a small sample of our subscriber-only offerings.
A full subscription unlocks daily long-form feature stories, newsletters, and podcast extras. Head to theken.com and click on the red subscribe button on the top of the Ken website.
Today's episode was hosted and produced by Rahel Philippos and I, Snigdha Sharma, and it was edited by Rajiv CN.